Hi, I'm Laura. I've been coaching swimming for, wow, over 15 years now. I still can't believe it sometimes. You know, when you do this job, week in and week out, mornings, evenings, weekends, it all kind of blurs together after a while. Races, training sessions, wet towels in the car. But there's this one day, one moment that, even now, more than 10 years later, I can still see it like a movie playing in my head. I'll never forget that day. And honestly, it changed the way I coach forever. Back then, I was coaching at a city pool, one of those classic old municipal centers. Lots of character, not a fancy place, but it had heart. My kids, they were mostly between 8 and 16, some beginners, some already hitting their stride at regional meets. I loved working with them. I still do. Kids that age, they're fearless, energetic, full of surprises. But with that energy comes a responsibility, a big one. And looking back now, I see that I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. It was an early spring afternoon. Pool was packed as usual. We had maybe 6 lanes going, half the kids doing laps, some warming up, some doing kick sets. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then, something happened. It wasn't loud. No scream, no splash. Just this sense, like, wait, something's off. You know how sometimes your gut tells you before your eyes even catch up? That was it. I looked across the pool and I saw one of my swimmers, small kid, maybe 9 years old, slipping under the water and not coming back up. Even now, telling this, I get goosebumps. Because in that second, everything slows down. It's like you're inside this bubble. I didn't think, I just moved. And what happened next? Well, that's the story I want to share with you today. Because that one moment taught me more about this job, about being a coach, than any certification, any training seminar ever could. But hey, before I dive into the whole thing, no pun intended, if you've ever had a moment in your life that changed the way you see your work or the way you carry responsibility for others, I'd really love to hear about it in the comments. Seriously. And if you're a parent or a coach or maybe just someone who cares about keeping kids safe, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps get this kind of story out there to more folks who might need to hear it. Alright, so here's what happened that day. So, how did I end up here coaching kids in a pool? Well, it wasn't exactly a straight path. You know, I grew up in a small town not too far from here. Swimming was my first love, been in the water since I was 5. My parents used to joke that I was part fish. I swam competitively all through high school, even did a little in college. But back then, I never imagined I'd make a career out of it. I studied education, actually thought I'd be a school teacher. But after graduation, life kind of, took its own turns. I started volunteering at the local rec center, helping with the swim classes. One thing led to another, they needed more coaches, and before I knew it, I was running practices. I got certified, started working full-time with the city's youth swimming program. That was, over 15 years ago now. At that time, I was about 40 when this story happened. I'd already been coaching for a good 7, 8 years. And let me tell you, coaching kids isn't just about teaching technique. It's about trust. It's about building relationships with the kids, with their parents, with other coaches. Every kid's different. Some are little firecrackers, full of energy and mischief. Some are quiet, shy. You really have to pull them out of their shell. And honestly, that's what I love most about this job. It's not boring. Every day brings something new. Some mornings I'd be on deck at 6 a.m. with my coffee, trying to wake up while the kids are bouncing around like they've had 3 cups already. Evenings, weekends, swim meets, long days at the pool. It's a lot. But I loved it. The pool I was coaching at back then, it wasn't fancy. Your typical city-run place, old tile, locker rooms that always smelled a little musty, the hum of the filtration system in the background. But there was heart. The other coaches, the lifeguards, the kids, we were like a little family. The program had grown a lot. We had over 50 kids training regularly, ranging from beginners just learning proper strokes to some really talented teens who were placing at state meets. Life was busy. I was juggling coaching with raising my own 2 kids, plus keeping up with all the swim team events, the paperwork, the constant emails from parents. You know how it is, when you work with kids, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's 24/7. But I thrived on that energy. Being around young athletes keeps you young, in a way. It forces you to stay sharp, stay positive, even on the days when you're running on fumes. But here's the thing, back in those days, the culture around safety during practices, well, it wasn't what it is now. Sure, we had lifeguards. Sure, we had protocols. But looking back, there were blind spots. Areas where we could have been more vigilant. I think a lot of us, me included, had fallen into a bit of routine. You get comfortable, you trust your instincts, you think, I've got this under control. And most of the time, that's true. Until it's not. And that's why this particular day, this one moment, it shook me. It made me realize that no matter how experienced you are, no matter how well you think you know your swimmers, things can happen in a split second. And the responsibility we carry as coaches, it's bigger than we sometimes admit to ourselves. It was a great Thursday afternoon in mid-April, the kind of day where the clouds hang low and the air feels heavy with promise. I'd just finished my lunch break, turkey sandwich, nothing fancy, and I climbed back up to the deck of Lane 3 at the municipal pool in Salem, Oregon, wiping my hands on my whistle strap. The bleachers were half empty, a few parents scrolling on their phones, a handful of lifeguards lounging under umbrellas. My assistant coach, Marcus, was setting up cones by the starting blocks, pacing back and forth with that look of focus he gets when he's gearing up for a drill. Down in the water, my swimmers were doing their usual warm-ups, streamline glides, flutter kicks, pull sets. The chlorine tang in the air felt familiar, comforting even. In Lane 2, there was Emma. She was 16 then, tall for her age, powerful kick, eyes always fixed on the lane line like she could see the finish before she even started. In Lane 4, little Joey, just 8, always giggling, cheeks like ripe apples, totally fearless, but still figuring out how to tuck his chin properly. And then there was Sarah, 12 years old, always trailing just behind Joey. Sarah had this shy, quiet confidence. I'd seen her blossom over the season, going from, I can't swim underwater, to smashing her personal bests at regional meets. She was the one who caught my eye that day. I remember pausing for a second, standing there with my clipboard in hand, feeling that familiar buzz of adrenaline I get before any main set. The afternoon session was about to start, a mix of sprint work for the older kids and stroke drills for the younger ones. Normally, I'd call everyone in, give a quick pep talk, and we'd dive in. But on this particular afternoon, something in the rhythm of the pool felt out of sync. Maybe it was the muffled echo of water hitting tiles, or the unusual stillness of the lifeguards. Someone else must have felt it too, but no one said a word. Just as I opened my mouth to start the set, I noticed a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't a splash or a shout, nothing dramatic. It was Sarah's body, drifting under the surface, arms limp by her sides. At first, I thought she was doing a drill, holding her breath, practicing her streamline, but something felt wrong. I lowered my clipboard and squinted, heart tightening. Marcus, I called, voice low, check on Lane 4. Now. He looked up, puzzled, then followed my gaze. In that moment, the pool went quiet, like someone hit mute on all sound. Marcus dove in without hesitation. I sprinted down the deck, pulling off my polo shirt as I ran. The moms looked up, startled. A few started to stand, but I waved them back, eyes locked on the water. By the time I reached the edge of the pool, one of the lifeguards was already moving, trying to help Marcus bring Sarah up. The surface broke, and suddenly she was there, pale, eyes closed, hair plastered to her forehead. The guard passed her up to me. "Go, go," Marcus urged. I half cradled, half dragged her to the deck, feeling the weight of her little body in my arms. Never in all my years had I felt time stretch like that. Every second felt like a minute. I slapped her back, turned her over, hollered for rescue breaths. My mind was racing. "Remember your training. Count to 10. I still get goosebumps thinking about how I forced myself to follow each step, each compressed, life-saving motion. I jerked my head toward the deck guard, signaling for the AD. Another quick moment of panic, and then it arrived, lights flashing like a silent alarm. But when I gave Sarah that last breath, I saw her fingers twitch. Her eyelids fluttered. And then, she coughed. Water sprayed, her chest heaved, and she looked up at me with those wide, scared eyes. "Coach Laura," she whispered. That was the trigger, the moment I knew she was going to be okay. And just like that, the routine afternoon had shattered into something I'd carry with me forever. The other kids had stopped swimming. Parents were gathered at the railing, alarm and relief warring on their faces. Marcus leaned against the fence, breathing hard, eyes wet. I knelt beside Sarah, holding her hand, feeling the tremor in her palm. In that moment, surrounded by the echo of dripping water and a crowd of worried faces, I realized how thin the line can be between normal and life or death. And that realization, well, that realization changed everything. That afternoon, just when I thought the worst was behind us, everything started to spiral. Sarah was coughing and conscious, sure, but her color wasn't settling back to normal. She was pale, sweat beading on her forehead as if she'd just run a 100-yard dash instead of been rescued. I had her propped up against the pool's edge, listening to her lungs, when Marcus yelled that the AD was malfunctioning. Its battery icon was blinking red. My heart sank. I'd relied on that device, trusted it to guide me through this nightmare, and suddenly it was useless. I had to think fast. Keep her talking. I barked at one of the lifeguards, who was fumbling with the unit. Help me get her to the deck. Two other coaches rushed over, slipping on the wet tiles, and together we hoisted Sarah onto the deck benches, towels beneath her. But as soon as she was horizontal, her breathing hitched again, sharp, shallow gasps. My mind raced. Should I roll her into the recovery position? Should I call 911 first? The whistle around my neck felt heavy, like a noose of responsibility. I glanced at the parents streaming up from the bleachers, their faces etched with panic. One mom was crying into her phone, likely dialing for help. Another dad was yelling at a guard to get professional medical support immediately. My throat went dry, and I had to swallow hard to keep from losing it. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't one of those controlled safety workshops we sometimes ran with local EMS. This was real life. My pulse hammered in my ears as I checked Sarah's pulse at her wrist, weak, fluttering, and heard another coach shout that the ambulance was 10 minutes out. 10 minutes felt like eternity. I knelt by Sarah's side, pressing gently on her chest, counting compressions under my breath, 1 and 2 and 3 and, but her ribs felt so fragile, like I was risking more harm with each push. At the same time, I knew compressions were necessary if her heart was collapsing under the strain. A lifeguard hovered, offering oxygen tubing, but the regulator hadn't been set up for air. Someone had forgotten to replace the cylinder after last week's meet. The weight of oversight pressed on me. My usual confidence wavered, and for a split second, panic threatened to swallow me whole. Then I caught sight of Marcus, jaw clenched, nodding at me. We locked eyes, and in that moment, the chaos around us faded into the background. I straightened, took a breath, and issued orders as clearly as I could. Okay, no AD, no portable O2. We're going old school. Lifeguard Tina, you keep those compressions going. Marcus, alternate with her every 2 minutes. I'll do rescue breaths. Someone call for a stretcher. I need towels, dry towels, stat. My voice felt loud in the confined pool deck, but it steadied me, gave purpose to the frenzy. Minutes ticked by in a blur of action, compressions timed to my watch, breaths timed to a silent metronome in my head, coaches swapping roles, towels pressed against Sarah's chest to keep her warm. Every now and then, I'd glance at her face pale, fragile, and whisper, "You've got this, kiddo. Stay with me. Breathe." My words felt hollow, but I couldn't stop speaking them. With each breath I gave her, I'd squeeze her hand, feeling the tiny tremor of life. And then, just as exhaustion crept into my bones, and I thought I might collapse too, the distant wail of sirens cut through the pool's muffled echo. I glanced toward the entrance, spotting the flashing lights beyond the windows. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the situation was still precarious. Our job wasn't done until Sarah was safely on her way to the hospital. In that moment, standing over her with my heart pounding, I realized that no matter how many drills you run, how many certifications you earn, Rail Emergencies will always find a way to surprise you and test every ounce of your preparation, skill, and courage. Then I heard the paramedics shouting as they burst through the doors, and I stepped back, hands shaking, trusting them to finish what we'd started. But inside, I knew this day had already changed me, shattered the illusion that I was invincible, reminded me how high the stakes truly are when you're responsible for a child's life. It all came down to that one beat, the moment when every second felt like a lifetime and every breath hung in the balance. I remember looking at Sarah's face as the paramedics swarmed around us, their voices low but urgent. One was prepping the stretcher, another was checking her vitals, but in that chaos I felt a sudden calm collapse into pure adrenaline. My hands were still shaking from holding her small body during CPR, but now I found myself hovering at the edge of control, my heart a wild drum in my chest. I watched as they lifted her gently, her little legs dangling off the stretcher like wet towels, and I caught Marcus's eye. His face was white, but his nod told me he trusted me, that together we'd done everything we could. But then there was this flicker in Sarah's hand, her fingers curling around mine for just an instant, and I felt a tidal wave of relief crash into my chest so hard I gasped. "She's in there," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, because at that moment the truth of how close she'd come hit me with the force of a punch. The paramedic leaned in, murmuring something technical about airway obstruction and pulmonary edema, words that floated past me like noise, because all I could focus on was her eyes, those wide, scared eyes that flicked open to look at me one last time. She tried to smile, that little half-grin she always had before a race, full of grit and hope, and I almost broke down, tears stinging my vision. The sirens had grown louder now, echoing off the concrete walls of the pool facility, mixing with the frantic splashes of the life ring floats that the lifeguards were tossing back into the water. It was the most dramatic moment of my entire career, the climax of everything I'd ever taught these kids about safety and trust, because now it was my turn to trust the system, to trust myself, and to let go. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Coach Ramirez, one of the head coaches from a neighboring program, his face grim but supportive. "You did good," he said quietly, and I nodded, But I didn't feel good. I felt hollow and full all at once. Watching Sarah being wheeled away, her little body shaking with each bump in the corridor, I realized the true weight of responsibility, how it presses on your chest even when you're breathing normally, how it keeps you awake at night replaying that frantic sprint across the pool deck. I'll never forget the way the overhead lights reflected off the stretcher rails, or the echo of the paramedics' footsteps as they carried her out the door. In those final seconds before the ambulance doors slammed shut, I squeezed her hand one more time and mouthed, "Hold on," even though part of me wondered if saying it out loud was wishful thinking. Then the doors banged closed, the sirens turned into a distant hum, and I was left standing in the suddenly empty pool deck, surrounded by towels, cones, and scattered goggles, reminders of a world that had gone spinning on without me. The lifeguards were gathering their gear, the parents were rushing down to the exit, and I felt an ache so deep it was physical, like a bruise on my heart. But then Marcus came up beside me, resting a hand on my back, and I heard him say, "You saved her." And for the first time since that flicker in her hand, I let myself believe it. It was in that split second of triumph and terror, in the clash of fear and faith in action, that everything changed, for Sarah, for me, and for every coach who watches this video and realizes that being prepared isn't just a checklist, it's a promise. By the time the ambulance doors shut and the sirens faded into the distance, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration settle over me. We cleaned up the pool deck in a sort of daze, goggles stacked, cones put away, towels gathered into baskets, and I remember standing there, hands on my hips, watching Marcus double-check that every kid was safely accounted for. We finished practice early that day. Word had spread so fast that only a handful of swimmers showed up that evening. The parents were shaken, whispering about the heartbreak it would have been had we not acted so quickly. But the truth is, I was the one who felt most changed. Later that night, after sandwiches brought by a grateful mom and a stack of condolence cards from families in our program, I drove to the hospital, heart still hammering in my chest. I walked down the fluorescent corridor until I found Sarah's room 312, bright and a little too sterile. When I pushed open the door, she was sitting up in bed, clutching a stuffed dolphin that someone had left on her pillow. Her eyes were wide, a little red around the rims, but there was that spark, that fierce determination I'd always admired in her strokes. She managed a shaky smile and mouthed, "Coach Laura." I pulled a chair close and took her hand. "Hey, kiddo," I said, voice catching, "you scared me today." She shrugged, moving the dolphin into my lap. I'm okay now," she whispered, and I saw tears slip down her cheeks. "You saved me." In that moment, I realized how powerful a coach's presence can be. It's not just about times on the scoreboard. It's about being there when it counts most, about being the calm in someone's storm. Over the next few days, I sat by Sarah's bedside, reading her notes out loud, recounting every detail of her favorite drills to keep her spirits up. The doctors checked her lungs, gave her antibiotics for the mild pneumonia risk, and finally cleared her to go home. When she walked out of that hospital wing, still leaning on her mom for support, I felt a surge of pride so big it nearly knocked me off my feet. Parents hugged me, Marcus slapped me on the back so hard I gasped, and Sarah waved that silly stuffed dolphin like a flag of victory. Back at the pool, the program held an emergency safety summit the very next week. We updated our gear checklist, ran additional training on AD maintenance, and doubled the number of lifeguards on deck during peak hours. I even started a monthly safety audit, no more blind spots, no more assumptions. I'd learned the hard way that routines can lull you into a false sense of security. Now, every time I walk onto the deck, I carry that lesson with me. A few months later, at our year-end banquet, Sarah stood up in front of the whole club, parents, coaches, swimmers, and gave a short speech. Her voice quivered, but she said, "Coach Laura saved my life." She never gave up on me. The room exploded in applause, and I remember thinking that it wasn't just my name she was honoring. It was every coach's name who shows up every day, ready to do whatever it takes. Today, more than a decade after that afternoon, I can still picture the flicker of movement beneath the water, the weight of Sarah's body in my arms, the holler of sirens, the hush that follows a hero's moment. That day resolved more than just a near tragedy. It reshaped our entire program, strengthened our commitment to safety, and reminded me why I fell in love with this sport in the first place. I still get goosebumps thinking about it, and I know I always will. Because every time I hear a whistle, I remember the promise I made to keep these kids safe, to never take a single breath for granted, and to be ready when a moment demands everything I've got. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. I remember driving home that evening with the windows down, the cool spring air brushing against my face, but inside my chest felt tight, like I'd run 100-yard freestyle at full sprint. For days afterward, I was replaying every moment, Sarah's arm drifting under the water, the taste of chlorine on my lips, the roar of my own heartbeat in my ears. To be honest, I felt both proud and utterly shaken. Proud that I'd acted without hesitation, that the drills and certifications had kicked in when it counted. But shaken because I realized how close we'd come to losing her, how a single second of inattention could have turned everything into a different story. I still get goosebumps thinking about how her little hand closed around mine just before she slipped away. That moment became a sort of touchstone for me, a reminder that coaching isn't just about stroke mechanics or lap times. It's about life and death, trust and vigilance. In the weeks that followed, I found myself tensing up at the sound of a dropped lane line or at the echo of someone calling clear before a dive. My dreams were full of pools draining into darkness, and I'd wake up with my heart pounding, convinced I'd somehow failed. But alongside the anxiety came a deeper sense of purpose. I started keeping a little journal by my bed, jotting down reflections after each practice. What went well, what needed attention, how I felt. It became almost a ritual, a way to process the emotional aftermath and to hold myself accountable. Professionally, I became a stickler for detail. I'd arrive an extra half-hour early to test every piece of equipment, personally inspect the AD, talk one-on-one with each lifeguard to confirm their comfort with emergency protocols. Some of my colleagues teased me, calling me over-prepared, but after that day, I realized there is no such thing. Every precaution is a lifeline. On a personal level, I found my relationships shifting too. I was more patient with my own kids, more attuned to their moods, more willing to stop what I'm doing and just listen. Saving Sarah made me cherish every moment with the people I love, every laugh, every shared meal, even every banal conversation feels precious now. Years later, I still carry that day with me. It's woven into the fabric of who I am as a coach and as a person. Whenever I see a child hesitating at the edge of the pool or a parent peeking over the railing, I feel that old rush of responsibility and gratitude. It's a bittersweet aftertaste, a reminder of how fragile life can be and how powerful our actions are when we choose to step up. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that feeling for anything. It made me a better coach, a better human, and taught me that every breath, every heartbeat, is a gift we must never take for granted. I learned that preparation isn't just a checklist. It's a mindset that lives in every decision you make, every glance you cast across the pool deck, and every drill you rehearse until it's second nature. That afternoon taught me that experience alone isn't enough. It must be paired with humility, curiosity, and a refusal to settle into comfort. I realized that routine can be the enemy of vigilance, and that true responsibility means treating every practice, every swimmer, as if their life depended on it, because sometimes it does. On a deeper level, I discovered how closely trust and accountability are intertwined. The swimmers trusted me to guide them safely through the water, and I learned that trust is maintained by the small, invisible choices we make daily. Testing the AED battery before practice, double-checking lane lines, and taking a moment to really see each child rather than scanning a roster. I also came to understand that leadership isn't about grand speeches or impressive statistics. It's about showing up with clarity and calm when the moment of crisis arrives. Since then, I've carried that lesson beyond the pool walls into my personal life, recognizing that the same attentiveness and care I bring to safety protocols are what strengthen my relationships at home and in my community. In short, the most meaningful victories aren't medals or personal bests, but the knowledge that you've honored the trust placed in you when it mattered most. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that revelation for any trophy, because it's become the guiding current in everything I do, reminding me that vigilance, compassion, and preparation are the real measures of success. After that day, the story of Sarah's rescue quickly became something of a legend among our coaching community. Colleagues would drop by the pool deck and ask me, "Is it true you pulled Sarah out of the water yourself?" And I'd nod, brushing it off as though it were just another Tuesday. But inside, I felt the weight of what had happened. The program directors invited me to lead safety workshops across the county, sharing my experience and the practical changes we'd made: monthly AED checks, extra lifeguards at peak hours, detailed emergency drills that became our new standard. I even spoke at a regional coaches conference, standing on a stage in front of a few hundred people, retelling that afternoon in a way that highlighted not only the skills, but the mindset shift we all needed. Some attendees teared up, others took furious notes. It reinforced for me that sharing a real-life example, warts and all, can be far more powerful than any hypothetical scenario. Back at our home pool, I noticed subtle but meaningful shifts. Parents began arriving early for practice, not just to watch, but to learn the basics of pool safety. Lifeguards took more pride in their roles, often asking to lead drills themselves. My younger coaches started coming to me with questions about emergency protocols rather than just stroke technique. And though I never faced another situation exactly like Sarah's rescue, every time we ran our updated drills, I could see in my team's eyes that they were more confident, more prepared, and more respectful of how quickly things can go sideways. Personally, I found myself more intentional in every facet of my work. I encouraged feedback from colleagues, invited local EMTs and fire department personnel to run joint training sessions, and even collaborated with the school district to integrate water safety education into their health curriculum. The ripple effect was undeniable. Kids who might never have set foot in a swim class were suddenly asking their parents to sign them up, and community attendance at pool safety fairs tripled. In a way, Sarah's near tragedy became a catalyst for positive change far beyond the walls of our facility. 10 years on, when I see Sarah at alumni meets, she's now a college freshman majoring in marine biology, I feel a surge of pride that goes beyond the usual coach's pride. She reminds me that the best part of our job isn't the trophies we help earn, but the lives we help safeguard. And while that April afternoon remains burned into my memory, what followed taught me an even more enduring lesson: that the strongest legacy a coach can leave is a culture of vigilance, compassion, and relentless preparation. So here we are, more than 10 minutes after I first told you about Sarah slipping beneath the water, and we've traveled from panic to pride, from lessons learned to a culture transformed. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Every time you step onto a pool deck, as a coach, a parent, or even a casual observer, you hold someone's life, however small, in your hands. It's a powerful feeling, and I bet it makes you wonder, are you truly prepared? We all talk about safety protocols, AD checks, drills, and lifeguard training, but let me ask you this. When was the last time you tested that defibrillator battery yourself? When did you last walk the deck with fresh eyes instead of autopilot? Here's the question I want you to think about, and be honest in the comments. What's the one safety step you keep promising you'll do, and then keep putting off? Maybe it's updating your first aid certification. Maybe it's actually reading the manual for the new rescue tube. Or maybe it's simply pausing for a full equipment check before practice starts. Whatever it is, I want you to share it below. Don't let routine lull you into ignoring the small details, because it might be that tiny detail that saves a life, just like it did for Sarah. Thanks for watching, and if this story stirred something in you, whether it's inspiration, unease, or a fierce determination to be better, let me know. I read every comment, and I know together we can keep raising the bar for safety and care in every pool, every practice, every moment. So tell me, what safety step have you been meaning to get around to, and why not commit to doing it today? I'll see you in the comments.